Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Fatal Attraction Part 3. Today we're talking about the tragic life of Travis Alexander. When we last left off, we had talked about how Travis was within a time limit to get married. As being a very firm believer in the Mormon faith, he had a time limit to get married, as in with the Mormon faith, they put you into different wards from the moment you're 18 till you're 30. And after the moment you turn 30, you're then put into family wards that have married couples that have families or older single couples, which pretty much lowers your chances of finding a potential mate. Longtime friend of Travis Alexander, Sky Hughes, wife of Chris Hughes, would later comment that Travis had accumulated so much in his life, but one of his downfalls was self-sabotage. And one of those ways that he would self-sabotage was through romantic relationships, because he was just always afraid of building and making a romantic connection. And by April 16th, 2008, Travis would put his New Year's resolution on a blog he had recently created to kind of talk about his life and his upbringing. As I had talked about before, that his passion was to become a motivational speaker. And one of those ways he would start doing this is creating this blog. In this blog, Travis would write, "This year will be the best year of my life. This year will eclipse all other years. I will earn more, travel more, love more, serve more, and be more than my whole life combined. This will be the best year of my life." Unfortunately for Travis Alexander, this would not be the best year of his life, where one of his past mistakes would come to haunt him in the worst way possible. I want to make a quick disclaimer right now, as Jodi Ann Arias is a pathological liar. So in our story that we're going to be discussing, parts where Jodi is making statements or comments is from the words or the confessions and testimonies of other people, as anything that Jodi Arias says, we cannot believe. Jodi Ann Arias would be born on July 9th, 1980 in Salinas, California, and she would be one of 4 children. She would be born to her father, William Arias, who was a Mexican American, and her mother. William would own a string of restaurants as Jodi was growing up, and the family would often help him at these restaurants as much as he needed. Now, unlike Travis Alexander, Jodi Arias was actually fairly popular in school and actually did well in school. When Jodi was 11 years old, her family would relocate to Santa Maria, California. Jodi would actually adjust fairly well to the new surroundings, and her classmates and friends would describe her as artsy, as she had a big passion for painting and photography. The only thing they would say about Jodi and her family life was her family tended to be a little bit more stricter than most parents. Her first problem with running in with her parents would start when she was only 14, where her and her friend Patty had started a noodle plan they would do on top of the roof of their house. Patty would later recall that for several weeks, her and Jodi would take a couple pots and put them on the roof where they would try to grow some marijuana plants. And Patty would recall saying that they would water them and tend to them every single day and would only bring out a couple buds. But eventually, Jodi's parents would actually catch Jodi and Patty growing the plants on the roof. Now, most parents would probably ground their child or discipline them in some way, but Jodi's parents were different, and when they caught Jodi growing these plants on the roof, they would actually call the police on 14-year-old Jodi. And Patty would later recall that this moment was a very defining moment in Jodi's life, because it is at this point that she began distancing herself from her parents. And this is also around the time, because of this, that she started keeping secrets from her parents and started lying quite a lot. Shortly after this event, the family would relocate again, and this time to Eureka, California. And Jody would often call her friend Patty and tell her that she was completely miserable there. And because she was so miserable, she started rebelling a lot more. And because she was rebelling a lot more, her parents would start putting her on a tighter leash. And by the time she was in high school, she had a curfew of 6 p.m. It's at this point that Jody would regularly make snide remarks about her parents. And at one family gathering, she can be seen screaming at her mother, Sandra, and smacking her across the face. Now, even though her mother didn't do anything, her father would walk up and smack her across the face for smacking her mother. One of Jody's childhood friends would later recall, when Jody got angry, she really laid into her mother. And her mother would only try to control or calm her, but because Jody was so defiant, she was grounded a whole lot. This friend would also recall and say that many times Jody would scream at her mother and tell her, "I hate you, I wish you weren't my mother." Even though Jody knew the consequences, she just didn't care. When Jody was 17 years old, she would move in with her boyfriend that was 20 years old. And a little side note to be known is her boyfriend Bobby was someone that she was on again and off again since she was about 15 years old. Jody would later recall and say that her parents had actually grounded her for 3 months for skipping school. And she couldn't fathom being grounded for 3 months until she was 18. She would later say being grounded meant no phone, no TV, no social gathering of any kind. You were just in your room, period. And I couldn't fathom being grounded for 3 months, so I just ran away and moved in with Bobby. She would later then get a full-time job as a waitress because Bobby himself did not work. So she would work full-time as a waitress job so she could support herself and Bobby. All had went well for a few months until one day, Jody had a feeling that Bobby was cheating on her. So one morning she would wake up and follow Bobby to the library. Once she had gotten into the library, Jody would actually hack into Bobby's Hotmail account and had found that he was in fact talking to another woman behind her back. After Jody had all the evidence she needed, she would print out the copies of the conversations and approach Bobby and confront him about his infidelity. And they would quickly break up. But they would eventually get back together, and this would go on for a while, just getting together and breaking up. And it would just be a very toxic pattern, something that would be very common in Jody's life. Eventually, the two would actually break up for good, and Bobby would later say in order to fully get away from Jody, he would actually move to Medford, Oregon. And this would not last long, as Jody would actually follow him all the way to Oregon and would tell him that she moved there because there were better job opportunities. But she would go to his apartment and spend time with him, but notice how his roommate treated his girlfriend. Jody would later recall talking about Bobby's roommate, Matt, and would talk about how he treated his girlfriend. And Jody would say that I had never seen anyone be so chivalrous or respectful with a woman before. And it was very jarring. I had seen it on TV, but I'd never seen that in real life for me personally. And it made me reconsider my relationship with Bobby. And it's around this time that she quit trying to pursue Bobby and started focusing more on Matt. Bobby would ultimately end everything altogether when he would come home one night and catch Jody and Matt in bed together. Once Jody and Matt had became public about their relationship, they would quickly quit being roommates with Bobby and purchase an apartment and move in together. And the two would actually have a relationship that would go on for at least a couple of years. But that relationship would quickly sour as Jody would get the feeling one day that Matt too was being unfaithful in their relationship and had an inkling that he was talking to other women.